myself, during this introduction, I'm questioning it. Those are the ground rules. Ready? What an honor, what a privilege to have the advocate for the United States Constitution, for constitutional government, for honest money, for freedom. The only candidate who is a military veteran who has outraised her active duty military, all other candidates combined.
Welcome, thank you. I want to introduce my wife of 55 years. We have one of our 18 grandchildren here. Linda's with us today. This is fantastic. I hear we have quite a few people, and it looks like quite a few. And we had an earlier event over in Idaho. And it looks like we may have a few more here tonight. Catch up a bit. But it is great. And I am just so impressed with what's going on in the country. I know what's going on in Washington. That's depressing. Yeah. But what's happening in the country is not depressing because there are a lot of people like you out there. And you're just finding out where they are and they're getting very excited. There's a group of people who have known there's been problems but have felt disenfranchised and haven't been involved. They knew exactly what we should have been doing a long time ago. They've sort of dropped out, but they knew and still know exactly what America is supposed to be all about. And I believe they're coming back in the fold and excited. And there's another group coming together with that remnant, and that's called the young people of this country. That's where we should be excited. Ideas have consequences. You have to have ideas. You can't change anything. the type of government a country gets is not an accident. You say, oh no, just so they messed up when they got there. No, they got there and most of them stayed there and they thought it was going to go on forever. They thought we could live beyond our means, borrow money and print money and do the things that they've been doing, never realizing there was an end point. And though there's been a lot of us working in the vineyards and trying to get the attention of the people, the real attention has occurred just recently. And it's in the last 4 or 5 years, the discovery that this country's bankrupt and we just can't continue this spending. We have to quit the spending. The financial crisis that hit in 07 and 08 was an eye-opener. People know that we can't afford it anymore. But it's also been an eye-opener for what we've been doing overseas. Most people now are starting to realize that when countries grow too big and extend themselves around the world, which countries have done for 1,000 years, they do that and they think they're invincible and they go too far. I think the American people are waking up and saying, why are we wasting our resources, our financial resources, our lives, our young people overseas doing things that don't serve our interests? And this is what they've discovered 10 years ago. Up until World War II, we made declarations of war, we fought them, we got them over, and then we came home. But here we are, we're involved in undeclared wars, unwinnable wars, and unnecessary wars. And we have been there for over 10 years. World War II, fighting the Japanese and the Germans in less than 4 years. That war was won. We've been there 11 years in Afghanistan, and the people now, especially just recently, a lieutenant colonel came out and said, it's bad news over there. They're fibbing to you. And some people call it lying to us about the American people and what's happening. He says, we're not accomplishing anything. And the evidence is coming clear, and the statement made in the introduction about who do the military support ought to tell this country, let's wake up. It's time to end these wars. We can't afford them. They're of no benefit to us. And that means we need to bring our representative government that actually takes the oath of office seriously. This is the #1 reason why we're in the trouble that we are today. We've had too many people go to Washington, they take the oath of office, they have no remorse, they don't think they've done anything wrong, they just think, well, the Constitution is a pliable document, we have to modernize it, and we vote any way we want. But that is the reason we got into this mess. If we got into this mess by not having constitutions in Washington, the way we get out of this mess is send only individuals to Washington that will obey the Constitution of the world. Declaration of war, but what about the money issue? Where did they get this authority to say that a group of individuals in a secret room can decide how much money is going to be and who gets it? That system doesn't work. It serves the best interest of the special interest. It's called the Federal Reserve System. It needs to be exposed and then removed from on this. This was one of the reasons there was a constitutional convention, because they had to run away inflation. The continental currency was destroyed. So they wanted to take care of this problem, and they said only gold and silver could be legal tender. There could not be emitting of bills of credit, which is paper money, and no authority was given for a central bank. And What have we done? We've just totally ignored it. We've ignored it for 100 years. But 100 years is long enough. The experiment has been there, and they've been running roughshod over us, especially since 1971 when the last link to gold was severed. So I would say 100 years is long enough. We've learned our lessons. Let's go back to the Constitution and have sound. Reasons why we should have that constitutionally is obviously a very good reason. Another is economically. The Federal Reserve System is responsible for the business cycle. They inflate the currency, they distort the currency, they create the bubbles which serves of special interest, and when the bubbles burst, guess what? They go and bail out the people who are suffering from the bubbles being burst. So it also is a moral issue because if you or I counterfeited the currency, we'd all go to jail. But we allow our government through the Federal Reserve to counterfeit the money. That's what they're doing. They're debasing the currency. They're destroying the value of the money. So there's the moral issue. But one other issue and reason why it's so dangerous to have a monetary system like this is it allows governments to grow in a seductive manner. If we had a government that always paid its bill, and something Jefferson argued with, he didn't want, not only did he not want to print the money, he didn't want to borrow the money either. But think of what it would be like if we had to pay the bills as we went along. The American people would rebel because they would, just realize how much this is costing and how much harm they are doing. So I, one time, thought if I could get a bill passed to solve that problem, this would be very beneficial. So my suggestion, with a bit of tongue-in-cheek, was let's get rid of the withholding tax. Let's make everybody write a check to the U.S. government every month, and boy, we have our revolution. Tax. That's another little item we want to take care of. We want to get rid of that income tax. Now, we embarked 100 years ago into the welfare-warfare state, and since they knew direct taxation to pay the bills wouldn't be very popular, then they started borrowing money to a large degree, and then, of course, inventing the Federal Reserve so they could just print the money. And a country can get away with that a while. It delays the payment. You don't notice it. Some people suffer. Some of the people suffer. They don't realize that other people benefit. So it's very, very destructive. And it seems to work for a while when the country is wealthy. But we're not wealthy anymore. We've destroyed the productivity of this country. We have undermined the foundations of our currency and our economic system. So therefore, we're at a point now where all they do is print the money, and we've had special benefits because after the Bretton Woods broke down in 1971, we were able to be the printer of the world. Print the dollar because it was still accepted as if it were gold. And that was an illusion. It's been an illusion, but the illusion is coming to an end because it will be rejected. Economic law, moral law demands that this will be rejected, and we're in the middle of this. We're in the midst of a worldwide crisis in currency and financial problems that we have today. And yet, our government, through our Federal Reserve, currently are very much involved with the economic crisis of Europe because our banks have investment in their banks. They're in on this together. The banks in Europe bought up all this bad debt from Spain and from Greece and Italy. And they're bankrupt, so, well, we can't allow the banks to go bankrupt, too big to fail. So they've been promised that our dollars will bail them out. This is wrong. But if we allow them to happen, then, of course, if this continues, it'll be eventually the rejection of the dollar. And the total rejection of the currency can come rather rapidly, and it's a financial crisis that is uncontrollable, which can lead to a political crisis. This is why it's good to have a plan and improvise a plan where we work our way out of it. This is why I'm saying cut $1 trillion. Cut $1 trillion and back off and shrink the size of it. We already democracy, you know, Greece just the other day accepted a plan for the 15th time on what to do. And of course it was to cut them back on some of the jobs and some of the welfare. But there are riots in the streets because they believe, as many people in this country believe, they're entitled to it. They believe entitlements are rights. Entitlements aren't right. You have a right to your life. You have a right to your liberty. You should have a right to keep the fruits of your labor, but you're not entitled to take your neighbor's property through the politicians. Government to grow in this seductive manner, borrowing and printing money. When government gets bigger, it only gets bigger by shrinking our liberties. And now we're in a crisis period because our personal liberties are under systematic attack. These last 10 years have been very devastating. Even to the point now, recent law actually has repealed some of the provisions of the Magna Carta. You know, that's a few years old, and yet we're repealing that. Like allowing the military to arrest American citizens and held without a trial indefinitely. So our liberties are being threatened, and therefore we have to take a stand. And that's where I'm encouraged. There's a lot more people today wanting to take a stand, and they can and they will. But we have to realize that we need to understand what the principles of liberty is all about. I believe we have to know that governments can't give us our liberty. The most they can do is to protect our liberties. But our liberties, our life and our liberties come from our Creator, or in a natural way. It's a gift given to us, and we should own our lives, and we should own the fruits of our labor. But if we assume the government's going to do it, won't work. The effort to do this will require a lot of effort. It requires a lot of political efforts, obviously, but the political effort actually is secondary to the intellectual efforts. Ideas have consequences. I'm absolutely convinced of this, and I think that's what's happening in the country. People are coming to the obvious conclusion, and the correct conclusion, that the age of Keynesianism and inflationism and deficit financing, the age is over. We have to move it. If we recognize that, then we can start doing the right things. Being in denial is one thing, and we've been in denial. We believe for too long that we can continue to do this. When the country was super wealthy, and we were at one time, we're not now. We were the wealthiest country in the world, and we had the largest middle class. And today, our middle class is shrinking. It's shrinking in size, and it's shrinking in wealth. And the wealth, of course, is gravitating to the few. Now the few, you know, that's a mixed bag on challenging those few who have a lot of money. In a free society, there will always be rich people. And if a person is rich, or a company is rich, or if somebody sells us a product that we like, and they make a lot of profit because we make them profitable, and we buy their goods, we like their product, and they make a lot of money, and they get no benefits from the government, we shouldn't frown on that. If a company gets very, very big because they get special deals and contracts, and they're part of the military-industrial complex because they're part of the banking system, and they get bailed out by the government, that's a different story. We should deny them the special benefits and deny them the benefits. Is very healthy that's happening is the failure of this redistribution of wealth for the benefit of the poor. Libertarians and conservatives have done a lousy job over the years, especially when we were so wealthy. It was hard to say, oh no, we can't do that. Well, this will lead to some problems. And by just forcibly trying to help certain groups. But the evidence is here now You know, governments have nothing, they produce nothing, they only can steal from one group and give to another. So there is no such thing as free medical care. There's no such thing as free education. There's no such thing as free housing. And yet, oh yes, oh you people just don't care about people. So we have had in the past at least lost a humanitarian argument. Because if you weren't caring enough to take from one group to another, well, you don't care about poor people. But what happens if it becomes so clearly obvious that this system of government is no better than socialism, that it destroys wealth and makes more people poor? This is what's happening to us today. And there's nothing clearer than the housing bubble that we have. Housing program was set up, easy credit, affirmative action programs, Community Reinvestment Act, tell banks what they had to do, make sure poor people had their houses. But then some people ended up with a house that they really couldn't afford. And some people made a lot of money off the deal. The brokers and the mortgage people and the gamblers with the derivatives and Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, they made billions of dollars. And then, of course, when the bubble burst, as was predictable, then they say, well, you have to bail us out. We're too big to fail. And what happened? They got bailed out. They're back in business again. But what happened to the middle class? The middle class people lost their jobs and they lost their houses. It's proof that this program of government intervention and planning doesn't work. And therefore, we have to restore our understanding of how the market works, understand the confidence that free people can take care of more people than all the government programs put together. Governments will never be perfect, and the closer the government is to our home, the better it is. And right now, we fight and try to keep the federal government smaller and keep more government locally. But we also have to be very much aware of international governments coming. There is so much of that. They're talking about a substitute for the current monetary system, a new currency under the United Nations and the IMF. And of course, I see our national security hindered by belonging to those groups. That's never helped. By belonging to the United Nations and going to war under a UN resolution, or under NATO, not even conferring with the Congress is the way they do this. So local government is really what we want, and that's what the founders gave us. They gave us a republic. They wanted the states to be as independent as possible. Does that mean the states would run things perfectly? No, but it would be a lot easier changing one state than when you have to change, the whole country at one time or the whole world at one time. But once we have accepted this notion that it's okay for this because government's always going to help us, and we let this money gravitate to Washington with its income taxes and user fees and highway fees and everything else, the money goes to Washington, but it never gets distributed fairly. The bureaucrats get control of it. It's a political system. And then when they finally send some of our money back to us, guess what you get? A ton of regulations. You're not even able to spend your own money again. It isn't your own money because we sacrifice the independence of the states by allowing our governments to do this. And the same way with individuals. If we think that we can benefit from a government medical program, oh yeah, you'll give up for that. And then they're going to argue over mandatory health programs on whether the insurance company must give birth control pills or not give birth control. That is so far removed what a free society is all about. In a free society, you wouldn't have those kind of silly debates, about who's going to distribute birth control pills. We have lost our confidence in property rights. The government really owns the property. They own us when they invented the income tax. The income tax is based on the assumption, even if it's a low percentage, the assumption is the government owns all your income and the government will permit you to keep a certain percentage under certain conditions. And we jump through all the hoops. So it's the principle of the government ownership, of our income. But once we succumb to the regulatory agencies of the federal government, as well as many local governments too, that our land isn't our land anymore. Our land is we have the liabilities of the land, we pay the rent, but if anything goes wrong, it's our fault. But if we want to use it, how many permits do you have to have? It's just so out of control. We have a federal register that continues to grow. People talk about it a little bit, but it always grows by the tens of thousands of pages. I don't know if any one individual could possibly understand what's in the federal register. But there's one promise that I'll make. I will not expand the size of the federal register. I will shrink the size of the federal register. The executive branch doesn't have constitutional authority to write regulations. Those are laws. And they're very, very complex. And it's the Congress's fault. It's our fault for allowing our members of Congress to default and allow the courts and the executive branch to write law. Only the Congress is supposed to write law. And the president should not be allowed to make use of what they call the signing statements. Oh, I'll sign this bill, but about 2/3 of it I don't like, so I'm not going to pay any attention to that. So he signs a statement like a line item veto. I have no intention on having line item vetoes or signing these statements. Also, a president has no authority to write executive orders. We've heard this president say, well, they're not moving fast enough along on some of these environmental issues. I'll just write an executive order. But this is not part of the system. And yet, the complacency is getting smaller. People are waking up. I think we can say we've had enough of this. And especially this last 12 years, especially since 9/11. 9/11 was a disastrous day for us, and everybody understands that. But it was also an opening for people who wanted to do things they've been trying to do for a long time. For instance, the whole issue of Iraq was talked about and planned many, many years before 9/11. But they saw this as an opportunity. The first speech I gave on Iraq was in 1998, because that is when they said, our policy in the United States now is to have regime change. So I was speaking out then, but after 9/11, they concentrated too much on going into countries that had nothing to do with 9/11, occupying these countries while ignoring the people that I voted for to go after was the Al-Qaeda and bin Laden. But it took us 10 years to find him, and yet we went and occupied all these countries. We lost 8,500 Americans, 40-some thousand of severe injuries, hundreds of thousands of veterans today who are looking for help for post-traumatic stress syndrome and brain injuries, and the facilities aren't available. And we don't even know why we're there. This is why the military support my candidacy, because they know that the wars over there are not good wars. A young man asked me earlier today, he says, well, when would you be able to bring the troops home? I said, well, I've been asked that question before. My answer is, as soon as I can send the ships. We're not at war. We've been in police actions, and it's not called war anymore. It's called kinetic military action. So as long as it's kinetic military action, we don't have to worry too much about it. So, but we need, of course, an overhaul in foreign policy. They'd like to paint us as not caring about the world, but the founders were very explicit about foreign policy. They wanted a foreign policy of friendship and trade with people. Haven't we been a lot better off with the Chinese and the Vietnamese now that we've been trading with them rather than killing each other? I was drafted in 1962 during the Cuban Missile Crisis, and it expanded, and that decade was terrible. It took another 10 years to get out of there, and I mean, no Americans want to be defeated and lose a war. But we lost the war. We came home. It was a loss. And we have to learn our lessons from this. And when McNamara wrote his memoirs, McNamara orchestrated the whole war. But he was somewhat subdued before he died. He wrote this memoir. And one of the reporters asked him, he says, does that mean you want to apologize? And he said something rather unique. He said, what good is an apology? He says, the only thing that counts is that you recognize your mistakes and change your policies. That is what we have to do. But the French and the Americans were in Vietnam for a long, long time. A lot of people died, probably, of course, we lost 60,000, and there were probably 1 million Vietnamese that died, and just think that now the fact that we were there was to stop a domino effect of communism. And we left, and there was no domino effect. It looks like the domino happens to be the spread of capitalism to the Far East. I mean, the Chinese are now our bankers, and we're beholden to them. Vietnam, we travel back and forth, we invest over there, and they come over here. Just think how much more was achieved in peace than was achieved in war. And I don't understand. But that's exactly what the founders talked about. Others want us to be around the world because of this mystical thought that it's American exceptionalism. I think America is an exceptional nation. But this has been hanging around for a long time, that we have an exceptional system. We have the perfect political system, and therefore we have this moral, evangelical obligation to spread our perfect system to the world and teach them to be good Democrats and have elections and all these. Of course, we go over there, we invade them, we fight wars, we set up a government, they have an election, and they elect the wrong people, so we have to throw them out. We've been doing that for a long time, but the exceptionalism of our country, we can restore that. That means we have to have a free and prosperous country. We have to once again really protect our civil liberties, and we have to have a more peaceful approach to the world. If we set a good example and we're free and prosperous, you know, it just may be that somebody else might say, well, that is a good example. Maybe they would want to emulate us. Wouldn't that be so much better than us trying to force it down their throat with a bunch of stuff? After 9/11, of course, the one plan was that they had the opportunity to pass an act that they've been trying to pass for quite a few years. Most people know it as the Patriot Act. When I quizzed one of my fellow members about why I was voting for it, he said, how can I vote against the Patriot Act under these circumstances? It was a couple of weeks after 9/11. He said, I could never explain that to my people back home. I said, but that's your job. Go home and explain it to them. in Congress and you see a title to it, make the immediate assumption it's going to do exactly the opposite of what the title Now, if they had been more honest and said this is repeal the Fourth Amendment bill, they wouldn't have been able to vote for it, and these things wouldn't get passed. But that is essentially what's done. This has introduced the whole notions about how they treat us at the airports. Part of the Patriot Act attitude. No reasons for search warrants, no reason for probable cause, just because, oh, we're going to make you safe. They're working on the assumption that we will always be cowed into believing that we're only going to be safe if we turn all the responsibility over to the government and give up our civil liberties. It's wrong. You never have to sacrifice your liberties. The president, approximately 1 year ago, sent somebody over to the Senate to testify and announced a new policy. The new policy was that even if you're an American citizen, the president has the authority to assassinate him. Without charges and without a trial, because he's a bad person. Well, I would say he's a suspect, and maybe he's a bad person, but didn't Adolf Eichmann get a trial? Israel gave him a trial, and he was prosecuted and was killed. Timothy McVeigh was given a trial. The bad people are supposed to be given trials so that we're always protected no matter what charges are made against us. So this is a very dangerous thing to do. Proved that he was the king because he's already assassinated 3 Americans to test the waters. So you say, well, that's only 3. That's only 3. But it's the precedent that counts. If it's set up that way, when chaos comes, which it can come, we want to know whether we're going to have any protections by the rule of law, and right now it's fading away from us, and that's what we have to be alarmed about and change. But the Congress didn't do much better. They delivered to the president in December, and he signed it on Happy New Year, first day of January. He signs the National Defense Authorization Act. Now here, repealed posse comitatus, which prohibits the military getting involved in civil law. But not only do they allow the Army now to get involved and arrest people, the Army can arrest an American, and once again, American suspect, because he's with even those considered associated with certain elements. Just associated. And no charges made that they can be arrested by the military, denied legal counsel, put in prison indefinitely. This cannot stand. This is not what America is all about. There are other areas of our law which has undermined our personal liberties. I happen to think the enforcement of the income tax is deeply flawed because it's based on the assumption that if the tax people ever charge you for anything, you're guilty until proven innocent. That's not the way it's supposed to be. They're supposed to prove our guilt instead of saying you are guilty, you prove your innocence, or you will have to suffer the consequences. But we also have another war that's going on. Basically, all wars are against the American people. War overseas is an economic detriment, and it sets the stage for a violation of our civil liberties. But there's been another war going on. It was started back at the time income tax and Federal Reserve came in, but not very much. It was accelerated in the early 1960s, 70s under Nixon, and that is the war on drugs. But that's a war on the American people.
Right.
This attitude that the government has this responsibility to do, be so much involved that it means that they pass laws like as a consequence of the drug laws. that American people can't grow hemp. You know, hemp is a really dangerous product.
Yeah.
It's probably dangerous to some of my cotton growers down in Texas that might be doing it.
That's right.
But,
That's right.
been around since the beginning of our country, and we used it in World War II, but because the plant